it's a city of paradoxes, in that it's a bastion of education and technology and progressive politics and liberal politics and birthplace of the revolution and one of the epicenters of abolition. And yet it has this reputation, and there is this simmering underbelly of racial tensions and racial ignorance in some pockets. So as a Bostonian myself, born and raised in the suburbs of Boston, I've always been interested in exploring that dichotomy.
In what ways is that dichotomy, to use your phrase, Jason, in what ways is that dichotomy different in Boston, you think, than other American cities? I mean, Boston, I want to talk about Boston, and I know you are a Bostonian, so you didn't do this to demonize your city in any way, but it seems to me that a documentary can be done about any city in America that doesn't show its best side. So to that dichotomy you referenced, how is Boston, you think, uniquely different from other cities when it comes to race-based hostilities?
Well, I've only lived in New York and Boston. I was in LA for a short time, but I can tell you, having grown up in Boston, that the lines, when I grew up, I was born in '76. So the lines in Boston in the 80s and 90s were a lot sharper. The edges were a lot sharper from neighborhood to neighborhood. You knew what neighborhood you were in based on the demographics of the people who lived there. Now, that's a lot different now with gentrification and just luckily, I'm happy to say, progression over the years, that attitudes have changed and policies and leadership has changed over the years. But when I was growing up, it was very clear that if you were in certain parts of Dorchester, this was a white area. Other parts of Dorchester or Mattapan or Roxbury or Mission Hill, which we focus on this documentary, that was likely to be a black and brown area. And talking to other people for this documentary about where they grew up and where they lived before they came to live in Boston, they said it was a noticeable difference, that every city has a bit of natural segregation, but in Boston, it's on a different level.
What's the source, to your mind, and what's the documentary you share with us about the source of these racial hostilities in this city?
Well, we could have done 10 parts. It's a 3-part documentary. If we did, 8, 10, 12 parts, you go all the way back to redlining, you can go all the way back to the Revolutionary War if you want to draw lines that far back. We were trying to examine the modern racial history of Boston through the lens of this one murder case. And as I tell our editors and producers all the time, the main story is the highway. You get off on exits so you can digress a little bit to give a little bit of flavor and a little bit of context to that main highway. But you got to get back on the highway. You can't stray too far from that story. I tell them that you can stop to eat, but you can't stay overnight. And our main highway story was this murder that was committed.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to give too much away. We'll discuss that later on. But there's a woman named Carol DeMady Stewart who died of a gunshot wound to the head. Her unborn child succumbed 17 days later. And there was a manhunt for the person who her husband said did this, which was, according to him, a black man who had carjacked them and led them into the Mission Hill Project. So we went as far back as what Howard Bryant, who's in our documentary, calls the modern racial history of Boston, beginning with busing in 1974. And that's, to put it very briefly, a decision to force integration in public schools in the Boston area to equalize the learning experiences of white and black students throughout the city.
We will talk about that modern racial history of Boston when we come forward. You heard Jason Hare already tee up that they tell the story of the complex history of race relations in race-based hostilities, to be more exact, in Boston. They tell that story through the lens of this one murder case. He gave you some of it. We'll unpack more when we come forward. It's a pretty amazing story, a horrific story about this murder case and all that comes off of that. When you hear this story, it won't be unfamiliar to many of you. Some of you may recall the story, but this is not uncommon in the storyline of what it means to be black in America. The series is called Murder in Boston: Roots, Rampage, and Reckoning. And speaking of Boston, that's a good excuse to play a little New Edition. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Why does she stay on my mind all the time? It isn't love. Why does it hurt so bad? Make me feel so sad inside. describe this feeling that
Interrogating and unpacking.
That's what we do around here.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Escalade IQ. This the intro to the all-electric Cadillac perfection like Zoom. And on a full charge, you get 450 miles without the stop. Haiku. This is what I do. Daddy fat intellect since 92. Linked all the way back, panoramic roof. Coming 24-inch rim standard. Ooh, why? Shawty don't kill him. Cadillac diamond in the back, cold chillin'. And when I'm on attack, on the track is no ceiling. Sky's the limit. You hear me? You hear me? Straight drop, no parachutes. Lay lines like a longitude and latitude. Deal it, beloved, clearly we're hustling. Bussin', truckin'. Cadillac, Cadillac, Cadillac.
For more on the Escalade IQ, visit Cadillac.com.
Available late 2024. GM estimate 450-mile range. On a full charge based on development testing and/or analytical projection. Consistent with SCHA 1634 revision 2017 MCT. Range subject to change prior to production. Annual rates may vary based on service factors, including ambience temperature, terrain, battery age, and condition loading, and how you use and maintain your vehicle.
Did you know that every year, public school teachers spend nearly $500 of their own money for student supplies? At Donors Choose, we want students and teachers to have the tools they need for a great education. And now, more than ever, they need your help. Go to DonorsChoose.org and choose from teachers' requests that support reading, math, science, music, and more. Learn more at DonorsChoose.org.
Donors Choose. Support a classroom.
build a future.
Day 1. The hardest day. The day you hear.
This is a type of blood cancer.
But day 1 is just one day. At the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, we are here to help you move past day 1.
On day 45, I discovered an online community who shared great tips for in-treatment care.
On day 185, LLS helped me file my insurance claims properly.
To learn more and get help on day 2, day 28, or any day, please visit LLS.org or call 1-800-955-4572.
KBLA Talk 1580 is the exclusive media sponsor of this light of ours, activist photographers of the Civil Rights Movement. A dynamic new exhibition on view now at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. This light of ours showcases more than 150 photos taken by movement insiders from diverse backgrounds that reveal the vital work undertaken by a broad coalition of organizers and everyday people whose collective action changed America. This light of ours is one of 3 temporary exhibitions currently on view at the Skirball, which together explore issues related to civil rights, immigration, and pluralism. Tickets and more information for all 3 exhibitions are available at skirball.org. That's skirball.org. SKIRBALL.org.
Sounds different, huh? This is Tavis Smiley.
Hopefully you see what I did there. We played a new edition because we're talking about Boston in this hour. And Michael Bivins hails from Boston, and so does Donna Summer. I was on a plane a few weeks ago, as a matter of fact, and long flight back to Los Angeles, and I was able to watch a documentary about Donna Summer that I had never seen. It was so amazing. I met her a couple times in her life, but I learned so much about Donna Summer from that documentary and what it meant for her growing up in Boston. So we're talking in this hour with Jason Hare about this amazing series on HBO called Murder in Boston, Roots, Rampage, and Reckoning, which chronicles the complex history of race-based hostilities in the city. But we got to weave in something good about Boston, and so you can't get better than Michael Bivins and New Edition and Donna Summer and some other great artists from the city of Boston, but thought I'd just weave that in as we move through this hour. So there are 3 episodes of this. Let me just give you a quick overview, and then we'll let Jason unpack this for us. 3 episodes. The first is called Roots. The second is called Rampage. The third is called Reckoning. The series was produced in association, as Jason said, with the Boston. You mentioned actually the Boston Globe. There are some people connected to the Globe who are in this series as well. So you hear from some pretty notables in the city who know the city well. The first episode aired on HBO on Monday. The next two will air on Monday, December the 11th, and Monday, December 18th. So there are 2 more episodes to go. In case you missed the first one, you can always go back and check it out. But it's a 3-part documentary series, again, called Murder in Boston, Roots, Rampage, and Reckoning. And Jason Hare is on top of this. So, Jason, that said, tell me and the audience, we got the rest of this hour, of course. We're not, this ain't a 2 or 3 minute short take. We've got time to unpack this. Tell the audience, tell me about this murder case, which becomes the lens through which we talk about the history of race in modern Boston.
Yeah, October 23rd, 1990. I remember it vividly. I was only a kid. I was 13. I just turned 14 at that point. But I'm sorry, October 23rd, 1989. My bad. I just turned 13. A husband and a wife are leaving a birthing class at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. The wife is 7 months pregnant, and there's an infamous call from their car phone. Back then, there were no cell phones, but this guy, Chuck Stewart, had a car phone. He called 911 and said, "My wife's been shot, I've been shot." And he didn't know where they were. He said that a gunman burst into their car, put a gun to his head, and forced him to drive into the corner of the Mission Hill projects, which were just down the road, not 5 blocks away from the hospital they had just left. The wife died that evening of her gunshot wounds to the head. Chuck was fighting for his life. Half of his intestines were blown out, essentially. And their baby was saved by cesarean section. He would later succumb 17 days later. And there was an all-out manhunt in almost every black neighborhood in Boston, but particularly in Mission Hill, for this 5'10", 5'11", thin black man around 30 years old with a raspy voice. And you can imagine how vague that description is. It was described that he was wearing an Adidas tracksuit, which was very in vogue at the time. So it was a vague, generic description. And the police ran roughshod through the Mission Hill projects looking for this gunman. And it was all that anyone talked about in Boston for the 10 weeks of the search for this quote-unquote killer. Chuck was in intensive care for 6 to 8 weeks. And once he came out of intensive care, he identified a career criminal from Mission Hill named Willie Bennett in a lineup. And that's really whose story we're exploring through these 3 episodes in this series, is the community of Mission Hill and the Bennett family, and what was done to both the community and the family as the police were trying to get this suspect.
Let's talk about the community. Give us a better sense of what police did in Mission Hill, in this community. Talk about the impact of this search that they were engaging.
Well, the context is important, and we digress a bit in episode 1 to give you a little bit more context. But you're on the tail end of the beginning of the crack era. Crack had spread from New York to Boston in around 1987-88. This crime happened in 1989, and you were seeing unprecedented levels of homicides, particularly among young black men in the city of Boston. Mm-hmm. So they had instituted a policy of stop and frisk, which the Boston police used pretty liberally. I think it's almost euphemistic to say stop and frisk, or they like to call it stop, question, and frisk. It was really stopping young black men for no discernible reason other than to harass them and to violate their rights, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. So that's the atmosphere that this is all happening in when the search for this killer is being undertaken. So you have tremendous pressure from the media, tremendous pressure from the mayor's office to find the person who did this, because as we illustrate in episode 1, the fear of the mayor's office and the fear of all leadership in Boston was that white suburbanites would stop coming into the city, because it's oh my God, they're killing quote unquote us too now. It's not just contained to black neighborhoods. It's that nobody is safe. So this was the ultimate nightmare scenario for leadership in Boston, with a crime situation that had gotten out of control.
Yep. Give me a better sense of what happens in Boston. I'm talking now specifically, Jason, about the media. What happens when a white couple is shot allegedly at the hands of a black assailant, given the racial backstory in this particular city? It's a racially segregated city, as I mentioned earlier, and you acknowledge. But when a white couple, a pregnant white woman no less, accuse a black male assailant of doing this, how does that roll out media-wise in the city of Boston?
Aggressively and with increasing disregard for responsibility, journalistic responsibility. When you're looking at, and they were dubbed the Camelot couple, Chuck and Carol Stewart. They both came from lower middle class, blue collar neighborhoods in Boston. They had worked their way up. Carol was a lawyer in a wealthy. They lived in a wealthy suburb, and Carol was a lawyer in another wealthy suburb at a private company, and Chuck was the general manager of Cacus Furs, which was a furrier on Newbury Street, which is the classiest street in all of Boston for people who know the city. So they had, quote unquote, made it, and they're 7 months pregnant, very excited to have this baby, and Carol's life was cut down, and Chuck was fighting for his, and the baby was killed as well. So they were the most sympathetic figures possible in the media at that point. So it would be sacrilege for anyone in the media to publicly question the integrity of Chuck's statements at that point.
I'm not going to give this story away, too much of it, and I'm letting you do most of the talking. Of course, it's your conversation anyway. Yeah. I'm moving through this gingerly, but I said moments ago on this program, as you heard, that these stories are not unfamiliar to black people. And the black folk listening to this program right now, they have probably already figured out, where this story is headed when a white couple accuses a black assailant of doing something so horrendous, and all hell breaks loose in the city of Boston. That's all I'll say about that. But the audience, I'm sure, is already on to this. Let me just ask you, when Mr. Stewart makes this allegation that he and his pregnant wife were shot by this black assailant, were there any doubts at all raised by anybody, including inside the police department, as this story unfolded? Again, I'm trying not to give too much away here, but there are all kinds of things that one sees in retrospect that should have been clues then. But was there anybody in any way questioning what this white male, Mr. Stewart, said?
Well, as you can expect, and this is really the first time that a deep dive has been done on this case. It's been 34 years, and that's how sensitive a topic this is still in Boston, is that no one has really touched that third rail. But as you can expect, the members of the black community that we interviewed immediately smelled a rat. And yet, no one came forward, no leader in the Boston community and no media member in Boston came forward and offered any sort of skepticism. Chuck's story was bought hook, line, and sinker. And also remember, there was no precedent for this. So you have, as Michelle Caruso, who was one of the lone journalistic skeptics, we have her in our story thinking that the leadership in Boston was thinking inside a box, and that was a white male, Irish, Italian box that they were thinking of. And they had a very difficult time thinking that anything except what this other white male Irish guy had said was the gospel truth. And there was no precedent, like I said, for it. So that this had never happened before. Now, if this happens, immediately people can pause and say, wait a second, let's make sure we don't get Chuck Stewarted here. But at the time, it was so horrific and so monstrous that all you wanted to do was get this killer off the streets and bring some semblance of justice to this family and to this man whose life had been destroyed by this quote-unquote black assailant.
Yeah.
So, no, to answer your question, there was not an ounce of skepticism that was voiced publicly in the wake of this crime.
The part that troubles me, having seen the series myself, again, trying not to give too much away here, is that there were, Jason, as you know, it's just your project, you're the showrunner here, there were holes in this story from the very beginning. but the police were so intent on finding this black assailant that they looked the other way. Even the media in Boston were so riveted by this story that they didn't do their job, I believe, as journalists. What say you about that part of the story?
Well, from the media's perspective, and this is back pre-internet, this seems like the Stone Ages now when we talk about it. It was only 34 years ago, which isn't that long a time in the grand scheme of things. But you had three main news stations in the city, Channel 4, 5, and 7. And then you had the Herald and the Globe. And there was a lot of competition between all five of those entities to be first with whatever scoop was out there to be had, especially newspapers. The television journalists had only a few hours or a few minutes at the top of the hour at 6 and 11 every night to give you an update on where the investigation was. But the investigative teams at the Herald and the Globe had all day, every day to chase this down. And a lot of their sources were from the police department. So if the police department are believing a lie and they're pursuing a suspect who fits the description of that lie, and they are leaking information to the print journalists, then the print journalists are printing lies. And pretty soon you can imagine how big this snowball gets and how troubling a scenario it was. Mm-hmm. So then you end up getting underage kids who had started a small rumor that it might be someone from their neighborhood. That snowballs into these kids being brought into police headquarters, their rights being violated, not being offered an attorney, and being threatened and intimidated into giving false statements so that we could wrap this case up with a nice bow and find the black man with a raspy voice who did this and everyone could move on. But
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jesse. Everybody can move on. Go ahead and finish. Everybody can move on. Finish your point. I'm sorry.
No, I'm good.
Okay. No, I'm sorry for the interruption. I was thinking out loud, and forgive me for that. As you were telling that part of the story, my mind immediately went to the Central Park Five. The parallels between what they did to these black boys in Boston and what we now know they did to these black boys, these young black men in New York, the Central Park Five. The parallels are eerie, Jason.
I don't think that it's too far from the realm of possibility to think that Chuck Stewart saw that story and recognized the terror that was unfolding on the streets of Boston every night for the previous year or so, and put two and two together and said, hey, this is easy. I can just blame a black man and all attention will be diverted from me. I mean, now we're down the road, Tavis, we're discussing the outcome of the case, and I'm fine with that. I mean, I think that anyone who doesn't put two and two together by the end of episode 1 in this story probably needs to look at themselves a little bit more and their prejudices a little bit more. But I'm not interested in this being some sort of big twisty whodunit. I think that
I got it.
When people see the description of this case, they know who did it.
Episode 1 is Roots. It aired on Monday, December 4th, and thankfully HBO replays stuff over and over again. Episode 1 is called Roots. It's already aired. Episode 2 is called Rampage. It airs Monday, December the 11th. And episode 3 is called Reckoning. It airs Monday, December 18th. Jason Hare is our guest talking about this series. It's pretty amazing. Murder in Boston, Roots, Rampage, and Reckoning. More when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
For all the freedom-loving folk, this is Tavis Smiley.
I feel like freedom.
What's up, party people? It's your favorite MC's favorite rapper, MC Light here. And we're celebrating 50 years of hip-hop, authentically powered by Cadillac. And we're going to take it way back to where it started. It was only fitting that hip-hop began with teenagers at a back-to-school jam in the rec room of a South Bronx apartment complex by an 18-year-old brother. By the way, I'm also sure he had a Cadillac parked outside. He noticed the energy on the dance floor when he switched between two turntables, extending the beats, repeating the breaks, and never losing the rhythms. And that was the birth of hip-hop. And from that moment, it took off.
For more on how Cadillac is celebrating hip-hop's 50th, visit Cadillac.com/audacity.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Arraignment is scheduled tomorrow for the off-duty Alaska Airlines pilot accused of trying to crash a plane carrying more than 80 people in October. A grand jury has indicted 44-year-old Joseph David Emerson on 83 counts of recklessly endangering another person and 1 count of endangering an aircraft. One of the 3 Tacoma, Washington police officers involved in the death of Manuel Ellis, who is black, maintains he never heard Ellis say he couldn't breathe while restraining him. Officer Matthew Collins took the stand in his own defense yesterday, saying he was hyper-focused on handcuffing Ellis the night he died in March of 2020 and didn't hear him speak. Collins added he wouldn't have done anything differently even if he had heard Ellis say he couldn't breathe. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Now at Lowe's, get the lowest prices of the year on select appliances. Get up to 45% off and save an extra $100 on every $800 you spend on select appliances. Valid through 12/6. Savings vary based on purchase amount. Exclusions apply. See Lowe's.com for details.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers are going to Vegas this week. All expenses paid by the NBA. The Lakers beat Phoenix last night by 3. Exciting atmosphere at Crypto.com. The win sends the Lakers to Vegas for the semifinals in the NBA's in-season tournament. They'll play New Orleans Thursday night. Milwaukee and Indiana meet up in the first game. LeBron scored 15 of his 31 points in the fourth quarter. Austin Reeves had 20 off the bench, including a clutch three-pointer with 15 seconds left. The Lakers got a huge break with 7 seconds left when the refs gave them a timeout after Reeves lost the ball. The Suns came up with the loose ball near their basket and would have had a chance to tie the game or take the lead. Oh well. The Clippers are back in action tonight. They take on Denver at Crypto. A win puts the Clippers back at 500. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like the style, though.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
The holidays are back, and you know what else is back? Wendy's Peppermint Frosty. So take some time for yourself with this cold and creamy treat this year. Choose wisely. Choose Wendy's Peppermint Frosty. Limited time only at participating U.S. Wendy's. Vanilla Frosty is temporarily unavailable.
I learned patience from my adoptive dad. All he had to say was,
"Hey, you got this. Just breathe." Hey, we're pretty good.
Yeah.
Might have to start a band.
I got it.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more. This message is brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
Diane from Michigan, a disabled senior citizen trying to get by. Henry from Florida, a veteran fighting to make ends meet. Elena from Arizona, a mother struggling to feed her daughter. Hi, I'm Connie Britton, and I support Feeding America because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year, like Diane, Henry, and Elena. Learn more at feedingamerica.org. Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Do you have both Medi-Cal and Medicare?
If so, the new LA Care plan called Medicare Plus can help you get the most out of your health plan for $0.
LA Care provides personalized service to Angelinos like us.
Plus, it gives us access to doctors and specialists across Los Angeles County.
For zero cost, we get access to full benefits.
From vision coverage,
in-home support services,
to prescription drug coverage and a quarterly over-the-counter allowance.
Plus personal equipment,
meal programs,
a gym membership,
and so much more.
For more than 25 years,
LA Care has provided Angelinos with access to quality health care at an affordable cost.
For our families,
our seniors,
our community,
it's a plus.
It's a plus
for all of us.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
You can't talk about Boston without some Bobby Brown. We played some New Edition, Michael Bivins, played some Donna Summer. You can't talk about Boston without playing some Bobby Brown. That would be the best part of black culture and black genius out of the city of Boston. But this conversation is showing another side of Boston. It's called Murder in Boston, Roots, Rampage, and Reckoning, produced and directed by Jason Hare. By the way, he's the one that did HBO's Andre the Giant. I mean, Jason's a bad boy. He's a bad boy, man. He did Andre the Giant, and he did The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary that everybody saw. That's Jason. And now he has Murder in Boston, Roots, Rampage, and Reckoning. It is my great honor to be in conversation with Mr. Hare on this program even right now. I'll ask him a couple of things about those things maybe later in this hour before I lose him. But I want to stay focused on Boston at the moment. It's on HBO, 3 parts. Roots, episode 1, already aired Monday, December 4th. Episode 2, Rampage, December the 11th, Monday, December 18th. Reckoning, episode 3. So Roots, Rampage, Reckoning, 3-part series on HBO. Check it out and get more into the story. But since you are a brilliant, brilliant audience, you've already figured this out anyway, in case you weren't around to remember this. But to Jason's point, it's the first time, 30-plus years later, that a deep dive has been done into what Charles Stewart, this white man, said happened to him and his wife. As you've already figured out, his story didn't hold up in the end. You've already figured that out. And, Jason, to that point, one of the things that black folks said, I mean, it's a fascinating piece of work you've done here. Congratulations once again. But one of the things that, black people always got a nose for stuff like this, man. To your point, we can smell a rat because we've been so discriminated against, so disenfranchised, so demonized, so lied on. The one thing that black folk are really good at is sniffing out a lie. And one of the things that gave this away for black folk early on in Boston all these decades ago was that this so-called black assailant shot the woman, the pregnant woman, in the head, but left the white man living. Now, this was supposed to be a robbery. That was part of the story. It was a robbery. But they shot his wife, his pregnant wife, in the head and left him living, and that did not pass the smell test with Negroes, Jason.
No, that's your word. I would not use that word. But,
I know.
It did not pass the smell test in a lot of the community. And also, there were other things about the crime. Dart Adams, who's an author and a historian and a Boston native, gave us a wonderful interview that we used across these 3 episodes. And what he said was, we didn't get a chance to go really into this in the doc, but he had told me during our interview that whenever these kind of crimes were committed, holdups, carjackings and holdups, carjackings weren't really that big a thing back then in that era, but holdups specifically, there was always a plan of escape. And oftentimes those crimes happened on the borderlines of those neighborhoods that I mentioned before. So if it was a white neighborhood and a black neighborhood and there was a borderline of a main street, it happened near that main street because if it's a black assailant, as Dart told us, they would know how to navigate their neighborhood and to go through an alley and hop a fence and get back in. They always had an escape plan. If you look at the map of where this crime supposedly happened, there was no escape. for that assailant. And so when Chuck described this to the police and said that the assailant was a black man with a raspy voice and an Adidas tracksuit with a red stripe, and he ran into the Mission Hill projects, you can imagine what the police's first response was. Well, he's here somewhere. Let's knock on, and I use that phrase gently, let's knock on every door and try and see if we can find a 5'10", 5'11" black man with a raspy voice. Well, you can imagine that the list is probably in the thousands of Boston's neighborhoods that would satisfy that description. And Stewart knew what he was doing. He knew that if it was vague enough, that would take attention off him for long enough.
Yeah.
So, go ahead. Sorry.
No. So Bill Bratton has been police chief everywhere in this country. He's been police chief in Boston, police chief in New York, police chief here in L.A. This program is nationally syndicated, but as you know, I'm flagshipped in L.A. So we're heard across the country, but L.A. is where I sit right now, and he was police chief here in this city as well. And I was fascinated by Bill Bratton and his take on the racism that he had seen over decades that persisted throughout this city. What do you make of Bratton's comments?
Well, Bratton was pretty open with us about how racist the Boston Police Department as an entity and as an institution was when he came on the scene in the 1970s. He was the youngest person who had been promoted to being the head of the Boston Police. He later on moved on to the Metro Police, which worked alongside the Boston Police, and then came back after this crime and all of what ensued afterwards, the fallout of this crime and the reckoning that we explored in episode 3. He came back to Boston and became commissioner and instituted, if there's a silver lining from that era, with this being the most egregious example of injustice in that era, police injustice. If there's a silver lining, it's what reform was made in the wake of it. And Bratton came in and instituted community policing. He got a lot more cops on the street talking to residents by regular practice. He got the community leaders and church leaders, spiritual leaders involved in doing similar policing and patrolling. And they got the murder rate, the youth homicide rate, all the way down to 0 by 1996, which is called the Boston Miracle. So that's another thing I mentioned to you before. If we had done 8, 10, 12 episodes, we could get into the ebb and flow of violence and justice in Boston since 1990. But that was the most challenging aspect of this documentary. Twofold. There were two challenges. One was getting anyone to talk, because this was a blight on the city, and a huge error was made by several institutions. So getting anyone to talk from either the families involved or the institutions involved was very challenging. And next was how to wrap up the series and go from 1990 to 2023 and say how far Boston has come within the last 5 minutes of a 3-hour doc.
Yep. I'll give you a couple seconds when we come forward to talk about how far the city has come. Before I do that, though, I want to talk about Raymond Flynn. I met him a couple times. He was mayor of Boston at the time. We talked about the police department and Bratton coming back later to be chief after having been a cop on the beat. But what was the mayor's office saying or doing in the midst of all of this? We'll talk about that and a great deal more to get to as we continue our conversation with Jason Hare, the brother who did The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary, did Andre the Giant. His latest is Murder in Boston, Roots, Rampage, and Reckoning. It's on HBO right now. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
From Leimert Park with love, this is Tavis Smiley.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
For all of us, this generation and the next, there is simply no place in our lives for litter. And yet, it's everywhere we look, and unfortunately, it does belong to all of us. So let's come together and create a litter-free, clean California once and for all. Remember to properly dispose of your trash and recycling. Secure truckloads with tarps to keep debris from flying out. Clean out your car when you're at the gas station. Take pride in your community by organizing a cleanup event or join a cleanup event near you. Zero litter is the goal. Join us at cleanca.com. That's cleanca.com. Let's do it together. Brought to you by Caltrans. cleanca.com. In association with KBLA Talk 1580, the Terry Claiborne Foundation presents its 26th annual holiday party, Saturday, December 9th, featuring live entertainment, celebrity appearances, plus food and drinks. There is a cover charge for this party of the season, but not if you're one of our special guests. All you have to do is go to our website at KBLA1580.com and sign up. That's it, that's all. Just sign up at KBLA1580.com and you could win entrance to the soiree of the season. But whether you win or not, get a ticket, support the kids, and come join us on the red carpet in your semi-formal club attire and celebrate the season with KBLA Talk 1580 and the Terry Claiborne Foundation as we collect toys for the youth in our community. That's Saturday, December 9th, 1110 South La Cienega Boulevard, just south of Olympic. It's a holiday party with a purpose.
I'm Terry Claiborne. It's going to be a party. Come hang out with us.
Who do you trust to get at the truth? Tavis Smiley. That's who. The conversation continues right now.
Watching my time, it's getting away from me. It's a fascinating piece of work that Jason Hare has done. It's called Murder in Boston, Roots, Rampage, and Reckoning, 3-part series, December 4, December 11, December 18. If you missed the first one, you can catch it on HBO. But 2 and 3 are on the way. Monday, December the 11th, Rampage, and the final piece, Reckoning, Monday, December 18th. Again, all on HBO. So, Jason, I mentioned a moment ago that while we talked about the police department, of course, going crazy, we talked about the media and all the things that they missed in this story that turned out not to be anywhere near true. What was Ray Flynn in the mayor's office doing and saying at this time?
Well, the shame of it is that Flynn was seen as a uniter in the city. When he ran for mayor, he was in his second term at the time. And when he had run for mayor, he ran as a racial uniter. He ran on economic populism, and he was inheriting a city that was still feeling the deep, deep wounds and racial tensions and hostilities from the busing era. So he did a tremendous job building a progressive coalition of black leaders in the city. And by all accounts, black and white, of people we talked to, those tensions were beginning to subside and things were getting better. Ray had a basketball background. He won a national championship at Providence and played for a cup of coffee with the Boston Celtics. So he played in a lot of black neighborhoods as a kid and was just a natural leader and a natural uniter. This case, though, happened, as we mentioned before, in the wake of the Boston Police's institution of stop and frisk. And those close to the mayor, Mayor Flynn is now 92 years old and declined to participate in our project. He's getting a little bit on in years, but Neil Sullivan was his policy chief, and he served as Mayor Flynn's proxy in this piece. And I owe a huge debt of gratitude to him for participating and being candid with us. And he said that for all they had accomplished, they lost control of the police. So Flynn came out the morning after the shooting, actually the night of the shooting, and said, we're going to put every available police officer on the street to find the man who matches the description that Chuck Stewart had given.
Quickly here, tell me how I'm asking now a question of you, not about the doc per se. How did you process what you heard and saw from the Bennett family? And this is the family of the guy who Chuck Stewart picked out in a lineup, this black assailant.
It was challenging. I'm close with a lot of the Bennett family members now because I've spent the better part of 2 years going up to Boston, getting to know them. Far before cameras rolled, we were making every effort to show them that their story was in good hands, and I would tell this thing responsibly and accurately, for them and with them. So it was shocking. And when we realized not just that Chuck had accused this man, Willie Bennett, of doing this or picked him out of a lineup and described someone who matched his description, but the police knew all along and people in Chuck's circle knew all along, and no one did anything about this. The most galling fact of this entire case, and now that the lid's off and we're talking about the aftermath as well, which we cover in episode 3, they held Willie Bennett after a rumor had surfaced in Mission Hill that he might be the one responsible. They held Willie Bennett on a very specious charge of robbing a video store in neighboring Brookline, Massachusetts, which was right over the border in Boston from Mission Hill. And they held him there so they could know where he was and that he would not flee as they were trying to put together a case where they could indict him for this murder. So they didn't really want him for the video store robbery, even though he matched the description of the robber. Yeah. They wanted to hold him and make sure that they could locate him if and when they had to indict him. Mm-hmm. So once things unfolded as they unfolded, Willie was exonerated immediately, but he still had to stand trial for that video store robbery, which I told you was specious at best.
Sure. And
he ended up serving 12 years for that robbery. Mm-hmm. Once I found that out, that's when I redoubled my efforts to talk to the Bennett family to try to convince them to participate, because I really felt like the world had to know just how deep this injustice ran.
No, they you know how it goes. We're gonna get you for something. We are going to get you for something. And I don't make comparisons here, but many people feel that way about O.J. Whether you think he did or didn't do it, they didn't stop till they got him on something. And I heard a comedian once say, you know you're in trouble when you get arrested and sent to prison for stealing your own stuff. He went to get his stuff back and still found himself in prison for years. They're going to get you one way or the other. I'm making no assessment about whether you think he did or didn't do it. That's not my point. My point is they will not stop until they get you on something, even if it's jaywalking. Our remaining moments with Jason Hare when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Unapologetically progressive. Unapologetically black. You're tapped into Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. Benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
This open enrollment season, LA Care Covered is offering health plans starting at $0 a month. Each plan provides benefits including $0 preventive services, 24/7 telehealth services, around-the-clock nurse advice lines, walk-in minute clinics, and more. Shop and compare premium silver plans with $0 deductibles to help meet your health goals. Ready to shop? Visit us online at lacarecovered.org for a commitment-free instant quote, or speak with us directly at 855-222-4239. LA Care Covered, your affordable path to wellness.
Mom's early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard to take.
And when I left the Evan-On, we decided together that it was time to see a doctor and make a plan.
Early detection gave us more time to seek out information and support as a family.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. For more information, visit alz.org/time-to-talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African-American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
Today, young adults face big questions about their future.
How will you make your mark? Do you want to be part of something bigger than yourself? Are you ready to learn new skills and make new friendships? Perhaps you have a dream that you're ready to make real. So, how will you make a mark with your future? As you embark on a journey toward finding these answers, the military can serve as a resource for providing help, information, and opportunities. A public service message from the Department of Defense. To learn more, visit today'smilitary.com.
Smart talk for curious people just like you. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Jason Hare, who is the showrunner, the producer behind this amazing HBO 3-part series called Murder in Boston, Roots, Rampage, and Reckoning. All 3 parts on consecutive Mondays, December 4. Episode 1 is called Roots, is called Roots. Episode 2, Rampage, Monday, December the 11th. Episode 3, Reckoning, Monday, December 18th. All at 9 p.m. Eastern and Pacific. Just got about 2.5 minutes left here, Jason. What do you hope? I want to ask you 2 things, though, in the time I have. One, what do you hope that the takeaways will be about this documentary series exploring this polarizing murder case in 1989?
I would love for people to change their perceptions about just how gross the injustice was at the time. I mean, I think that people know that the city was lied to and that we were all duped, including the institutions in the city, the media, City Hall, and the police department. But I don't know that they fully appreciate the lingering effect that this has on the community of Mission Hill and on the Bennett family.
Could something like this happen in Boston today?
I think something similar could always happen. There could definitely be a rush to judgment, and there could definitely be people who inform situations and inform investigations based on their prejudices. I think that something as egregious as this would be difficult to happen because this is such a comparison point. Every time someone gets blamed for a crime, people now know to look at the quote-unquote victim, especially in this case, the victim who was not as grievously injured as his partner.
Yeah.
So never say never. And I don't, the two big mistakes I could make in this case, in this documentary, would be to say that everything's better and it would never happen again.
Yeah.
But I could also make the mistake and say nothing has changed and Boston will forever be what it was.
Yeah.
Neither one of those is true. And as you know, all stories are a lot more nuanced than that.
This is not fair to ask you in 30 seconds, but we're in basketball season. For those of us who are basketball fans, Scottie Pippen's comments notwithstanding, I assume that you are still happy in the rearview mirror with what you did with The Last Dance that everybody saw.
Yeah, our team is tremendously proud of it. That feels like a million years ago in a lot of ways with where this country was then in terms of lockdown and all that. But that's a project that I will never forget, and it was one that I was privileged to direct.
Yeah.
I will be forever grateful for them for trusting me with their story, not just Michael, but the 105 other people that we interviewed as well.
Indeed, indeed. It was a great piece of work, as is everything that Jason puts his hands on, whether it's Andre the Giant or The Last Dance about Michael Jordan, or this new one, Murder in Boston, Roots, Rampage, and Reckoning. Jason, congrats on a great piece of work. Thank you for the conversation. I really appreciate your time, sir. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You too.
Thank you, sir. Back tomorrow. Do it all over again, Lord willing. Until then, thanks for listening to Tavis Smiley. As always, keep the faith.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest.